Hola, YouTube. I am back for part 2 of my last video. It got a little bit waylaid because we have some construction on our street, and the guys digging the other day hit our bell line, so all of our internet and everything went down. And I didn't film the video because there was no point, because I wouldn't have been able to post it. So I'm just getting to it now. They repaired it fairly quickly, so that was nice. And it wasn't their fault either. So, but we've had really good luck with Bell. But anywho, to end the video blog I started the other day, we start off this time with a couple of books, which I read poolside recently until it got freezing cold. First one, The Never-Ending Present, the story of Gord, Downie, and the Tragically Hip. The Hip are easily one of my favorite bands of all time. They are so Canadian, it's unbelievable. And this book kind of goes over briefly glimpses on, you know, how they grew up when they were kids, how they all met and came together to form a band, significant events that went on in their lives, where they recorded, how they recorded, who they recorded with, goes over all of their where they gigged, how they were promoted, and all the significant events of their lives amidst that whole 30-plus year career or whatever it was. And then, of course, the end of it kind of focuses on Gord Downie's brain cancer diagnosis and that kind of last year or two of their existence when they did that final tour that ended in Kingston with that crazy show, and his kind of late mission in life to bring awareness to the world of the plight of Native Canadians and stuff like that. So the book kind of touches on everything and gives a pretty honest view of them and their music and their legacy and stuff like that. And it also touches on how they were so thought of to be so Canadian, and how they didn't crack the US market, when in fact they did a fairly good job. I mean, they weren't like Nickelback selling arena tours, which surprises me because Nickelback's terrible and the Tragically Hip is unbelievable, but that's life, right? That's the funny way of how things work out. But to me, they are so Canadian. It's unreal, both in their humble attitudes and the way they go about their lives, and then of course also to the music. I mean, there's so many Canadian references, and just the general feel of even if it's not a direct Canadian reference, the lyrics and stuff just remind you of Canada and my experiences in my country. And the other thing that makes them so Canadian is that, yeah, they do have a lot of Canadiana in their music, but they also have a lot of world references in their music. And that is one thing about Canada that I think, as much as I have a love-hate relationship with the US, they're this country that is so close to ours in terms of how we live our lives, you know, the modernized Western society and stuff like that. But at the same time, I find them to be so, like, Canadians are a very patriotic people, but we're humble about it. We're quiet about it. We love our country. We love everything, but we're not like Americans where it's USA and no other country in the world matters, and they don't have to know about these other countries because they don't matter. Whereas Canadians are a little more, I think, worldly in their knowledge, and that is what I think the Hip also brought. They had all their Canadiana references, but then they also had all these world history events and stuff that's gone on through history all across the globe in their music, which I think is kind of also a Canadian thing, where we're more aware of the world around us, and understanding of it and stuff like that. So maybe that's just my view, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's how I see it anyway. So, but it's a shame Gord is no longer with us, and that the Hip will never be the Hip again. But they've got 30 years of music and a whole ton of albums they left us, and I've been listening to them a lot lately. But next up, the other book I read, Killer, My Life in Hockey, the story of Doug Gilmour, and it's written kind of in his own words. It's just him talking, basically. And so it goes over briefly on his childhood growing up in Kingston, same area as the Tragically Hip, and how he was a young kid. He was undersized, and it goes over his childhood with his siblings, David, Donna, and Debbie, I think, so they're all D's. And then, so then it gets into his hockey career when he started with his professional career, when he signed in junior with the Cornwall Royals, and then he was drafted 134th or 137th overall by the St. Louis Blues. He was brought in there, and although he was a scorer in junior, they wanted him to play more of a checking, shutdown, more defensive role, which he excelled at, while at the same time also putting up a generous amount of points despite his role. And there it went into his trade to Calgary, where he won a cup, and then his blockbuster deal where the Leafs brought him in, and that's when he became a bona fide superstar, a leader, and he brought the Leafs within a lick of the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row in the early 90s, and he just became one of the all-time greatest Leafs, and one of my favorite players of all time. Just one of those leaders by heart, by just watch me go. I don't need to say much. Just this is how you do it. You know, you never give up. You scrap. You scrape. You claw. You bite. Anything to win. You know. And then after that, after his time in Toronto, that was when his career started. It's on the back end, and he played some brief stints in New Jersey, and then Chicago, and then Montreal before he came back to the Leafs for literally one period. It was too bad the way it all ended, but yeah, throughout the whole book, he mixes in, you know, all of the life events that went on, his 3 different marriages and all the kids he had and the stories about them, and then it was also cool to get insights as to how the trades and all the situations, injuries, everything that went into his decisions on moving along and what he did in his career, and also the stories about all the other players and coaches and stuff. You know, it's cool to hear that stuff behind the scenes. I mean, you watch these guys play on TV, you hear the cliched interviews all the time, but you don't really know what's going on. And you know you would like it because everybody in Canada, oh, well, not everybody, but a lot of us play hockey, and we know the game. We may not be NHL worthy, but it's all a fabric of what we do. So these guys are just hockey players that are way better than us, you know. So it's you know, it's all understandable to us, but we just don't know. So it's cool to read, you know, kind of what goes on behind the scenes and stuff. And then at the end of it, it gets into his career after the game, where he briefly was involved with the Leafs in a player development kind of way. Coached the Toronto Marlies, their AHL affiliate, for a few months before he got a call from the Kingston Frontenacs, the junior team in Kingston. They wanted to come coach, and that was kind of like his call to come home, and he really thought that was the right move, and he's gone back, and I think that's where he still is. He went from coach to general manager, and I now think he's the team president. And I recently saw an interview with him, a little thing on him, and he was at the K-Rock Center in Kingston, where the Hip played their last show, and where they've renamed part of the street out front of it the Tragically Hip Way. So it was cool how that kind of all tied into it as well. So awesome book, awesome player, awesome game. Last up is a few video games. The first one James and I completed recently is called Cuphead, which I downloaded on my Nintendo Switch. It's done in an old style animation, like 1930s Steamboat Mickey kind of thing, and it's really cool. You play the game as Cuphead, which is literally a little dude with a cup as a head, and him and his buddy Mugman go to the Devil's Casino, and they're rolling craps, and they're on a roll, they're winning, when the devil comes in and says, "One last roll for all the marbles, fellas." They roll, they lose, and the devil says, "Well, now I own your souls." So then you beg and plead with the devil to let you go, and he says, "Well, only if you travel around Inkwell Isle and collect all of the missing soul contracts of all the other people I'm taking their souls from." So then that's just what you do. You go around, you play through levels, and then you end up fighting the boss, and the boss is one of the people who you need to collect their soul contracts. And then once you have them all, in the end, of course, you face off against the big man himself. And the bosses are crazy. Like, it's very kind of seedy, like, because it's in the Devil's Casino. Like, some of the bosses are like, there's a trio of booze bottles. There's like a 26er, a martini glass, and a beer stein is one of the bosses. A giant cigarette is one of the bosses. Like, it's a really neat, well done game, and it's like one of the most original things I've played in a long time. And it was just entirely fun the whole time. And it's difficult too, but not like I'm gonna throw this chair through the window kind of difficult, but challenging kind of difficult in a good way. So if any fan of any sort of video game, I think would like this game. I think this is a kind of game that would appeal to everybody, and it's super, super fun. So I highly recommend. Next up, I recently also played Mega Man Xtreme 2, which I had downloaded on my 3DS. It takes place in the Mega Man X series between games 4 and 5, maybe something like that, and is a follow-up to Mega Man Xtreme, which I talked about a number of videos ago. Uh, it's the same thing. Humans and Reploid robots live peacefully in the world in the 22nd century or whatever it is, but some of the Reploids go rogue every once in a while. They're called Mavericks, and that is where Mega Man X and Mega Man Z, or Z, whatever it is, hunt them down. They're these Reploid hunters, or Maverick hunters, and so suddenly there's a new crisis where on this island where there's the Reploid Research Center, something goes wrong and they have to go investigate, and it turns out that somebody is wiping Reploid's souls out of their bodies, sort of thing, so they're just becoming these useless pile of parts. And so Mega Man X and Z have to get down to who's behind this and stop them, and it turns out there's this new boss that's introduced named Burkana. And I didn't finish the game because it just got way too hard. I beat a couple of bosses after beating some of the Robot Masters on Mega Man X's side of the game. And then these boss levels just kept coming, and it was like I couldn't even get to the boss. I was just having problems with some of the jumping sequences, and they were just way too hard. And I'm like, you know what? I'm 43 now. I got many things I still want to do with my life, and my time may be limited, so I'm going to put this game away. so that was it. Great game. Looks great. Mega Man, you know, like, but it was just way too hard. Last up, Axiom Verge for the PS4. This game is unbelievably fun. It's a new game that's done in a retro pixely kind of style, and you star and play the game as a guy named Trace, who is he's like a scientist, and he's in his lab one night doing experiments when all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. The lights start flashing and go out, and he wakes up inside this weird egg-shaped pod. And as he exits it, he's in this whole other world, dimension, whatever you want to call it. And as he kind of traipses about, he finds a couple of weapons and some gadgets and stuff. And then these monsters, or mutants or whatever, start attacking him and want to destroy him in the name of Athetos. And he has no idea what's going on. Eventually, he meets this big disembodied robotic kind of head, who is still alive and is known as Elsa Nova, and she kind of lays out what is going on in this land and the story of it, and he just has to take her word for it, and he goes out and does kind of the things that she asks him to, and but the whole time you feel like you're not getting the whole story, and you may not be doing the right thing. And so as you go along, you just it's cool. You can pull up a map, and it shows you all the regions you've uncovered and where you haven't got to yet, and there's always a new gadget or a new trick you can learn that will help you get to an area that you haven't previously been able to access. So as you go through the game, you kind of have to keep going around and around. Every time you find something new, you can go, oh, I can go back here and get this, and what's in there, and you know, it's just it's a continual kind of cycle of re-exploration and stuff like that. And then in the end, well, I'm not going to tell you, but it's great. It's super fun. I wouldn't say it's difficult in terms of the hardness of the bosses and stuff like that, but it is a little overwhelming in terms of, okay, where do I go next? I'm stuck here. You have to really kind of explore every nook and cranny and think about every little gadget you have, and explore every little way of trying to get places in order to finally beat the game. So, but yeah, it's same thing as Cuphead. If you're a fan of any kind of style of game, especially old platformers, I think this is a game that would pretty much appeal to anybody. It's super fun. So yeah, but that's it. 2 books and 3 games, and that is the end of things for now, although I have probably a whole batch of other stuff coming in the near future, because I'm always up to something. So I should be back in the near enough future with more stuff, but until then, enjoy the rest of this quickly dwindling summer, and we will see you again soon.